and welcome to episode 103 of the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, where I have the pleasure of talking with Rachel Hill, who you might know as the Invisible Hypothyroidism. She's a social media thyroid advocate superhero, really. She's been around for a long time in the social media space, online presence, as a thyroid patient advocate. And that's really what we're talking about today, is advocating for your own thyroid health with the people around you. So in your workplace, with your family, friends, and with your children. It's something that Rachel's been very passionate about for a long time. She's won lots of awards in this space. She's authored 3 books all around thyroid advocacy in different relationships. She has a thyroid family Facebook group and email newsletter. She really has been around in this space for a long time, really contributing, as I say, positively and practically with lots of hope. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rachel and getting a little bit more of an insight into how you can advocate for yourself and your own health in amongst the world and the community and family in which you live. So enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Rachel Hill, to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast, all the way from the UK. Lovely to have you with me this evening and you this morning, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to jump into what I'm hoping will be some really helpful topics to your listeners.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, generally the plan for the conversation, and we were just saying, we could end up on some tangents because I think we're both pretty passionate about thyroid health advocacy and helping thyroid patients around the world. But the general topic of the conversation is that we want to talk about how we talk about our thyroid health with our family and our friends and our children and perhaps our work colleagues or bosses, so that they can understand as much as is necessary, or we want them to, or I mean, they're some of the questions that we'll explore. But yeah, how do other people around us understand what we're going through? So that's the topic. So stick around and have a listen. But Rachel, before we dive right into that, tell us a little bit about your thyroid health journey. I know many people listening will know Rachel anyway. She's known as the Invisible Hypothyroidism. But you're not invisible. You're this beautiful woman I can see in front of me. So tell us about the visible Rachel. Tell us a little bit about you and your story, and maybe your journey through the invisible hypothyroidism. Whatever you want to tell us to set the scene for who you are and how you are such a blessing, really, to the thyroid community.
That's a really lovely introduction. So like many people, I had symptoms of a thyroid issue quite early on. It was kind of speckled through my childhood. I was labelled as a kind of lazy child. I never really had much energy, would have muscle aches and pains, chronic constipation, migraines, things like that. And then when I got to about 16, 17, following a bout of swine flu, it just really ramped up. And I spent the next 5 years after that going back and forth to the doctors, just complaining of more and more symptoms. And considering at the time I was, for much of that time, a teenager, I should have been fairly healthy, feeling quite vibrant and active. And I just wasn't. I had, like I say, migraines, hair loss, acne, constipation, stomach and gut issues, acid reflux. Every part of my body was just affected, and I would keep coming away from appointments with another different prescription for all these various aspects. And eventually my mental health obviously started to take a toll as well, because when you're dealing with that many sort of physical health symptoms, it's hard and it gets heavy, and I found it hard to hold down a job. I found it hard to maintain relationships. Every aspect of my life was eventually touched and almost destroyed to an effect by thyroid disease. And by the time I was finally diagnosed, I was relieved to have this answer and know that I wasn't just making it all up and it wasn't just in my head. But I also felt really overwhelmed, really confused, frustrated, relieved, yes, but also quite scared. I didn't know where to go next, I guess. And I, still being in kind of quite a dark place mental health wise, My now husband, Adam, at the time was my boyfriend. He suggested that I started a blog. Loads of people 10 years ago were sort of blogging about various things. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, why don't you kind of get all your thoughts and feelings out? And he knew that I've always loved writing. I've just found different things to write about, depending on where I was in life. But yeah, he said, use your writing to kind of get all that out, and process it. And so I started writing on a blog. And after a few months, I decided to publish it and make it live. And yeah, the overwhelming response from the thyroid patient community, that there was this, I guess, mass relief that we're not alone in all of these symptoms, and getting diagnosed and feeling those mix of emotions and feelings, and then also starting medication but not feeling better as quickly as we would hope, or as quickly as the doctors kind of imply that we will. And yeah, within that, the invisible hypothyroidism was born, and this thyroid community that I lovingly refer to as my thyroid family. You know, we're there to support each other on the tough thyroid days, but also to celebrate when our health, you know, we're having a health win and we're finding something that's helping. And yeah, my website's still going, but I've since branched out into my email newsletters. I have various social media channels. I'm most active on Instagram and Facebook. And the idea there is to just keep spreading the message that we can get better, we can take control of our thyroid health. There are things we can do to help ourselves. Yeah, and I guess to just keep delivering a solid dose of hope to people, that we don't have to stay feeling really unwell for a long time, and that there is hope at the end of the tunnel to get back on top of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. That's you just sound a bit like an echo, an echo of the. So, I think those listening that are regular listeners of this show should think, oh, was that Annabelle talking, or was that Rachel talking? Because I think that's exactly, and that's why it's great to have many voices. And I think really, given the size of the thyroid family around the world, there's not really that many voices. And I imagine 10 years ago, it was interesting. About 10 years ago is when I started my food blog for similar kind of reasons. I just wanted, started going paleo and just sort of wanted to kind of blog about what I was eating, and why I was eating was because of my thyroid stuff. And I remember years ago writing a blog called My Hashimoto's Heroes. And yeah, and it's taken me sort of twists and turns to kind of end up kind of as Let's Talk Thyroid. But I love that we can use our experiences to help shortcut other people's journeys, because I know, like we were both diagnosed at similar ages, having had probably not dissimilar teenage hoods where you don't really know didn't really know any better, and so there is hope. I think there's always hope.
Yeah.
So I like that. And you're not alone. I mean, you probably hear too from people all the time that just say, oh, I'm so glad I discovered, whether it's your Instagram page or your podcast or your blog or whatever, and I'm not alone. And the number of people that still feel like they're alone in this journey. So you're not. If you're listening, you're not alone. We're at least two voices here to tell you that you're not alone.
Exactly, yeah. There are hundreds of thousands of people worldwide with a thyroid condition. And a lot of us know friends and family that have it, but we're just not aware that they have it because a lot of us don't talk about it. And that's a really important aspect for me, because if we can be a bit more open and talk about it, and by that I mean symptoms, getting diagnosed, treatment options, we can hopefully reach more people earlier on, and they don't have to be ill and confused for as long as we were. Yeah, I think it's a really important aspect to try and get more voices out there. In the thyroid community, we have a lot of kind of medical professionals, doctors, people within sort of naturopathic medicine, lifestyle medicine, functional medicine talking about it. And that is really good. They're putting really valuable information out there. But yeah, we also need those patient voices to be weighing in, the people that are living directly with it and feeling the direct impacts, and sharing what exactly is working for them. Because as we all know, there's no one size fits all when it comes to treating, managing, living with thyroid disease. So yeah, I often describe it as putting together this thyroid jigsaw puzzle. We have different puzzle pieces, different things that we need to do to get our health back to a good place. And for me, it's all about sharing those many puzzle pieces so that each thyroid patient can figure out which things are going to work for them.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I often say when we're talking about our thyroid stories, there's going to be people that will relate to your story in ways that they won't relate to mine. And so the more of us that are sharing our stories, the more people that we're going to be able to help. And I think that really leads really nicely into this topic of, well, how do we share our thyroid story? And that will look different depending on who we're talking to. So, how do we help, you know, those around us understand what it's like to have a thyroid condition? I mean, really, that's the kind of core question, isn't it, of what we're going to cover? And so, I mean, maybe to start with, Rachel, how important do you think it is that we share our stories to those around us so that they understand? Like, do you think that people around us really do need to understand, or is it something we can kind of keep a bit more private? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it differs. Number one, depending on what your thyroid situation currently is, your health situation, and how much you feel like it might impact those relationships, or how much it can benefit by letting those people in on it. And then, yeah, I think as well, it depends on what kind of relationships you have. So I know that, these days, as we were talking a little before we started recording, I work for myself. But when I used to have a more quote unquote regular job, where I would work in an office 5 days a week, I found it incredibly important to make my work colleagues and my line manager aware of my thyroid issues, symptoms, why I need to keep going for blood tests, doctor's appointments, what flare days are. I found that really important to let them know so that we could work together as a team within that office and that work environment, because with them understanding how that impacts me and what they can expect, it means that we can pull in as a team for further support. If I'm not going to be in for a day or two, I need someone else to be picking up that work that I was working on. And so having that open sort of communication and that fluid communication was really important. And I was really blessed with a really understanding line manager and bunch of work colleagues who were absolutely brilliant. And I appreciate that's not the same for everyone. So it really depends on what kind of environment and situation you're in. But getting those conversations going, it doesn't have to be a really daunting, get everyone sit down and have a deep conversation. Maybe if you're having some kind of fundraising or charity event, in your workplace, you could choose to do it for a thyroid organization, hold a bake sale, take some things in, get people talking about it. Or it's a really big thing these days, especially on social media, to ask people to donate to a fundraiser for your birthday and things like that. There are small ways that we can kind of get the conversations going without feeling like we need to make a really big deal of it. Because I think that's what a lot of people worry about. And a lot of people worry about, I guess, bringing like doom and gloom and negativity as well. And we can kind of feel a bit less wanting to share that stuff if we feel like we're going to be met with someone who thinks we're just moaning about it or wallowing, or just kind of sitting within that. And so it's finding ways to get those conversations going in a way that's not going to feel like that, that's going to feel more productive. But I think
that's a good kind of awareness raising kind of strategy.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. I actually had someone in my Facebook group ask just recently, and I said, right, I'm going to talk about this one with Rachel. Was pretty much that, like, she said she has a fairly high pressure job. She does want to be able to explain her health situation to her boss. In a productive way, and was just looking for some tips. And I said, well, how about we have a conversation about that, because I guess that's a little bit more of the deliberate conversation rather than just starting with the awareness raising. And I mean, I've got to say, it's a long time since I've worked in an employment situation, and I don't remember ever having a conversation with any of my employers. Maybe the last one about my thyroid health, but more maybe just in what you were saying, more of a conversational way rather than a way that I felt like I needed to explain anything. And certainly when I was a lot younger, probably when my thyroid was a lot worse, I probably could have benefited from having a conversation with my boss back in my 20s and my new baby lawyer job. That probably would have been quite helpful, but it wasn't even on my radar to even I wouldn't have even known where to start with it that way back then. So, if someone was wanting to have a deliberate conversation, is there anything you think, should be make sure they include in that conversation, or what information do you think is important for, say, an employer to understand?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to set up and manage those expectations. So, again, depending on where you are within your thyroid journey and your health situation, if you are still having frequent doctor's appointments and tests being drawn, investigations, you're being referred to an endocrinologist, there might be all those things kind of going on. It's important to set those expectations with your line manager, your work environment, that you're going to need to be going out to these things, and that might impact when deadlines could be met, or how much work you can realistically take on. And then on top of that, I think it's so important to start this conversation of what thyroid flares are and what that means. And by that I mean when we overexert ourselves, or we perhaps take too much on, and that could be physically, it could be mentally, perhaps there's a lot of mental stress going on, we can experience a bit of a setback in our health. And that can look like a day or two or a week or two of heightened thyroid symptoms, maybe symptoms that you've not seen for a while, coming back. Some people even experience them after sort of eating certain foods or drinking alcohol. But yeah, getting that conversation going around flares and awareness of thyroid flares, I found that incredibly important. And that is something that I just sat down and had a quick 5-10 minute conversation with my previous employers about, because I wanted to make them aware that I don't always know when flares are going to hit. A lot of the time they come out of nowhere. We know what common triggers can be, but sometimes we don't know what the trigger is. They still happen. And if I call up on the morning of a work day to explain that, I haven't had any warning. It's probably going to last a day or two in my experience. I think setting those expectations of what a flare looks like for you, how long it's probably going to keep you out of work before flares are then going to hit in future, they've already got that understanding, which is going to make it a lot easier going forward. You don't want to be explaining all of that on the day of calling in to say, I can't come in, I'm in a thyroid flare, and then trying to explain all that on the phone. So whenever I started a new job, I would make them aware of that sort of early on in the first few weeks of starting, just to kind of make them aware. But yeah, also just reinforcing that I'm still a valuable member of your workforce, and I do obviously want to be here and work and play my part. But so many people worldwide are living with various chronic health conditions, and getting our workplace to understand that is it's such a crucial part of our lives. We spend so much time at work. A lot of people, most people have full-time jobs, and if we can find a way to kind of bring those worlds together in a way that creates more mutual understanding, it can only be beneficial. And again, there's the caveat that not everyone's work situation is going to be as supportive. But if there are things that we can do to try and make the situation easier, then it's well worth having those discussions.
Yeah, I think it is a good one. There's probably a whole topic in and of itself is, how to for people to manage that full-time work, because I think that in and of itself is difficult. It's not something I've done for a long time, actually. I've had the privilege of working from home and working part-time really ever since I've had kids, and, my oldest child is nearly 20. So really it's a long time since I've worked in full-time employment. And I did work in full-time employment with Hashimoto's. I was diagnosed at 22. So my first, 5, 6, 7 years of work were full-time, as probably in those early days, which probably weren't great. And I didn't really know any better. I just slogged it out, really. I think that's what a lot of people with Hashimoto's and autoimmune diseases do, is we just push through, which probably isn't helpful in the long run. So I think that, maybe that's a whole nother conversation as to how do we deal with full-time work, because I do hear people asking about that too. Like, how do you manage? And I have to say, well, I don't have that experience recently to share. So, maybe that's a conversation with, for another day. But I don't know. You must hear a lot of those kind of similar kind of conversations as well?
Yeah, I've spoken it. I've touched on it a little bit in sort of previous articles, social media posts that I've created. But when I was working full time, the key things that I found helped me to keep on top of my thyroid health just that little bit better were things like ensuring I used annual leave days. A lot of people don't actually utilize them, and you don't need to be going on holiday. You can use them to have rest days at home, to just try and create that better work life balance. When our work life balance is off, our physical health and our mental health can deteriorate as a result, and that can obviously impact how well our thyroid condition is managed. So finding ways to create a better work-life balance, like making sure you take your annual leave
Mm.
days, booking in, recovery and rest days, making sure you're not taking your work home, leave work at the office, don't have work emails on your phone if you can avoid it. And if you're commuting to and from work, using that time to try to switch off and do something good for yourself, like reading a book, listening to a podcast like this, things that are going to help
Mm.
you just feel more balanced instead of I guess just off kilter. When our work balance isn't right, we can feel it. We start to feel burnt out, we feel stressed, and yeah, the impact to those stress hormones, the adrenal glands are such a big part of that endocrine system with our thyroid gland, can all impact each other and just add more fuel to the fire and makes it impossible to ever get on top of our health. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
things like that, things like, getting up regularly throughout the day, just have a bit of a walk around, take breaks from your screen, sipping water all day long. If it helps to keep a blanket and a hot water bottle if you're working at a desk sort of job. Yeah, there are things like that, little kind of hacks that can make you more comfortable at work and just conserve energy and make you feel more on top of stuff. And then if we're able to, we can also look at our line of work. I know that when I was working shift hours, so I used to do a more manual shift job where I would be working 12-hour shifts, and that could be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And it just didn't work for my body.
Yeah.
Again, that just broke.
No.
Yeah, it drove my health into a really bad place. And for some people, that works absolutely fine for them. But my body needs shorter work hours, more like 7, 8 hours a day fits better. I need to be able to get up and move. But if I'm on my feet all day, like in that job I was, it's the quickest way to send me into a flare. And then not having a
Mm.
proper sleep pattern as well. Those things are really important. They're some of those important jigsaw puzzle pieces to my thyroid health. So yeah, if we're able to reassess whether those aspects of our job are really okay or whether they're not really supporting our thyroid health, if we can change those, then again, they're all areas that we could reconsider.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I like that. And like some of these things are going to translate as we start to talk about the other relationships. And I think the big one, is our husbands or spouses, partners, uh, who, and again, probably depending on when the relationship started in relation to how you're feeling and when your thyroid condition kicked in, I think that's going to significantly impact, the impact of having a thyroid condition on your relationship. But I
Yeah.
know you and your husband have a book about this that's been around for a long time. And I know you've got a new book about how to talk to your children about your thyroid condition. So I want to get into that too. But when we're talking with, the closest ones to us, our partners who, have to live with us through the good days and the bad days, what are some of the things that you see are really important in being able to help them to understand that we're not just lazy and crazy, that we're, that we are dealing with chronic health issues? Like, how do you go about explaining that? And what are some of the conversations perhaps you and your husband have had around this?
Yeah. So Adam describes the day that I came home with this diagnosis as a thyroid condition as being really monumental in our relationship and how we function now. But he also found it massively confusing and overwhelming. I remember his one of his first questions was, is it terminal? Is it lifelong? Like, I have no idea what this
Mm.
means. And knowing what we know now about thyroid condition, we laugh a bit. It seems funny, but a lot of people, they don't know what a thyroid gland is. They don't know what hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's is. And so these questions are valid. And it's important that we approach those topics and those questions with a curiosity that's going to hopefully help make our relationship stronger. Because I often describe thyroid disease in a relationship as the third wheel. It can really sort of edge its way in and impact so many aspects, all aspects of our relationships. And especially in those romantic relationships, we hear from thyroid patients whose divorces, they've divorced as a result, or it's played a big part in the separation of their relationship, because it can impact everything from mental health to fertility, whether you're able to start a family or expand your family, as well as work life. And our spouses and the people that we live with perhaps aren't always the most understanding about how it can impact those areas. So yeah, being able to approach that with curiosity and start those conversations is, again, really important. And I found that keeping things fairly simple from the point of view of what Adam needs to know really helped. So, and that's why we created the book, You, Me and Hypothyroidism. It, just like everything else I kind of put out there, it keeps it simple. We only need to sort of give the information that is absolutely needed. We don't need to get bogged down in a lot of the more jargon side of things. So, explain that hypothyroidism means that a thyroid gland located in the neck, it doesn't produce enough hormone, and that can lead to X, Y, and Z symptoms, hundreds of symptoms actually. But we can keep it as simple as that. And then going on to say that it's treated with hormone replacement therapy, thyroid medication, but it can take a while to tweak that and get it right. And there are other lifestyle things we can do to improve our state of health with hypothyroidism. That's really important. And that's where we can pull our partner, we can pull our spouse or other family members in to support us in those. So one of the most important things that Adam does for my health is he calls himself a spoony champion. So within the chronic illness community, there's this idea of the spoon theory. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not actually. I don't think so.
It's
maybe tell me and I might be.
It's this idea that people with chronic illness, disabilities, health conditions, they start the day off with a certain amount of energy, and you can imagine it. I think in the original story of the woman that created it, she talks about having so many spoons. You can imagine it as a full battery charged up. Other days we might be starting the day with half a battery's worth of energy, 3/4, 1 bar on a flare day, and everything we do that day, all the tasks that we do, the jobs we have to do, they use a bit more of that energy, and that energy is only replenished as we rest. And so a regular person that doesn't have any ongoing health issues, they don't have to think about this stuff. They pretty much wake up. They might feel tired from going to bed late the night before, but it doesn't impede their ability to go to work and do their normal day-to-day things. But for people with health conditions like thyroid disease, we're often starting the day with a certain amount of energy. And if we use all of that up really early in the day, we're going to sort of become a potato on the sofa. Yeah, exactly. And if we do that repeatedly, we end up in a thyroid flare. And so using that analogy to explain my day-to-day to Adam, he said it was like a light bulb moment turning on. He realized that actually, that makes sense when on the weekend, if we have a really packed weekend of lots of things going on, Rachel can get to Saturday night and she's kind of done for the weekend. She's got nothing left for Sunday, whereas I can keep going. And that was a real moment of understanding how I kind of tend to need to pace my body just a little bit differently and just to be a bit more mindful. And that includes where you're putting your energy physically, but also mentally, and starting to put boundaries in on kind of saving some of that mental and emotional energy as well, because I think a lot of thyroid patients struggle with putting in those boundaries and knowing when to say no and knowing how many things to take on in terms of commitments. So yeah, figuring that out together and helping your loved ones to understand what your energy levels can look like day to day, that can really have a huge impact in itself. When Adam notices that I'm having what he calls a low spoons day, or that I'm already flagging a bit in the morning, he knows there are certain things he can do to try and recuperate some energy or get me started off better in the morning. And that might be that he makes me like a particularly nutritious breakfast, or is able to help out a bit more with things around the house, or to take the children off my hands for a little bit, and to just try and like pace my energy a little bit better. And often he can see when I'm starting to flag before I notice it in myself, because I think, like many thyroid patients, we tend to just carry on going. We push on and we get on with things. And that's not really what we want to be doing if we want to get on top of our thyroid health. We've got to learn what our new normal is, where we are day to day, and that's not to say that we're doomed to a poor quality of life forever, but it waxes and wanes depending on where we are in our thyroid health journey. If we're in a really good place and we're on top of everything, we're probably not thinking about our energy so much day to day. But if we're in a flare, or if there's a lot of other life stresses going on and that's impacting how on top of it we are, then we probably need to be thinking about our energy and pacing ourselves a little bit more. So there's a simple way to kind of get our friends and family members understanding how we function in terms of explaining those energy levels and opening up that dialogue of how we can differ day to day.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And if I look back to when my kids were little, I wasn't managing my thyroid health holistically back then. I've been on thyroid medication for the whole time, but when they were little, I hadn't really made any of the other diet and lifestyle changes. And so I look back and I think, well, it was no wonder I didn't really cope very well with 3 little boys. Like, I was exhausted, and I was very irritable. And like, I had a lot of that snappy irritability that comes with being hypothyroid. And I think, having probably a lot of mood issues, probably connected to my gut health, and still was eating gluten and grains back then. And it's only now that I look back and I think, oh yeah, I think a lot of those struggles that I put down to I'm just not a good mum to young kids was probably my thyroid health, in the way that I was not managing it in the way that I do now. And I often think, I wonder how different it would have been if I knew then what I know now. And so, but I didn't know to explain any of those things through the thyroid health lens. I guess I just was desperately waiting for Lee to come home at the end of every day from work. Like, if he was 1 minute late, I was like, I could kind of hold it together until 6 o'clock. And then, if he was like 6:05, I'm like, where are you? And I know now that was probably me. A lot of that was probably thyroid health. I mean, probably not all, but some of it would have been. And so I think just to know, be able to identify some of these symptoms as thyroid related. So I guess if you're listening and you're early on in, your thyroid journey, or you haven't been looking at some of those diet and lifestyle things alongside the medication, learning what can be connected and what isn't can be really helpful. To then help you to know how to explain that and get the help that you need. And, I couldn't have articulated that back then. So I think, you're doing really well to have little kids and be able to articulate that now. I think that's a really good thing. Really good for your kids. So
and that's why I created Thyroid Superhero, my book that was released about a month ago, because my 3-year-old, he's at the age now, he's really curious, he's asking lots of questions, and he started to notice that I take medication, I don't eat gluten. There are certain things mummy does differently to other mummies or other people, or to even him. And he was asking me, why don't you eat gluten, mummy? And why do you take that medication every day? And why is mummy tired again? He would say to daddy. When I was postpartum with my now 1-year-old last year, there was many tired flare days. And I figured that he couldn't be the only child asking those questions, and that actually there's a real value to educating our children, if we can, early on, what a thyroid condition is, what the symptoms are, what flare days look like. We want to raise the next generation to hopefully be even more compassionate and understanding to people with health conditions than our generation. And in our family, we find a lot of value in books. When my children have questions or interests about things, we turn to books. We love books. And so I felt like a book was a great way to get those conversations going. And
I can see it behind you. Do you want to hold it up?
Yeah, sure. It's it's age appropriate to sort of children, I'd say from about 2 years onwards, maybe up to about 9 or 10. It gets some of the questions answered and conversations going in a way that you can then, I guess, like manipulate it to your situation and change it into age appropriate answers. So there's some really lovely illustrations of sort of parents needing to rest on rest days, and speaking about how on those days it can help to do sort of more calming activities with your grown up. You might need to stay home, but you can sit and read with them. We can find ways to kind of work with it. I know on my flare days, one of my favorite things to do is to have the children play in the garden, and I will sit on the back doorstep with maybe a blanket around me and a cup of tea and just enjoy watching them play whilst trying to like recuperate some of that energy and let myself rest a little bit. But yeah, it's the aim is to, like I say, just get those conversations going so that we can have them understand what it is we're going through, and as they go through life, they will no doubt encounter people with not just a thyroid condition but other health conditions, and much of this can transpire to other health conditions too when we talk about flares and energy, things like that. But also there is a genetic component to having a thyroid condition, to having thyroid disease, and I want my children to be aware of the signs and symptoms in themselves, but also, you know, if they go on to have children, or they meet a partner or have friends at college, university, and they can spot those signs of something not quite being right, hopefully earlier than I did, because there was no one there to point that out to me. And once diagnosed, it started to make a lot of sense that actually I could spot those signs and symptoms in other women within my family as well. And we just, as women especially, we just tend to just push on, and we get told that it's normal to feel tired, especially as parents. It's normal to feel tired. It's normal to feel stressed or maybe low in mood and anxious. And actually, a lot of the time, people have these undiagnosed conditions like thyroid disease. So, yeah, I'm hoping that it's just helpful to children and families around us in more ways than one.
Yeah, I think it's good. And I think I saw, might have been on your Instagram, somebody commenting, or maybe it was when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago. I think it might have been when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that someone said, right, I'm just going to get this and lay it around for the kids, but hoping that the adults in the family will pick it up and have a read. And so I think, like you said, you know, I suppose the children's book is written nice and simply. And so, as you said before, trying to explain our thyroid health to our, you know, other adult family members doesn't have to be complicated.
Exactly.
I think one of the things that people seem to struggle with, and certainly this has come up, you know, in our household, is some of those more diet, you know, the diet and lifestyle changes. So like why, you know, helping people to understand why do a lot of people most feel better without gluten, and that, I mean, some of those things have an impact on the rest of the family, perhaps, you know, in different ways. And so I think sometimes that's where other people can, I don't know, maybe get a bit frustrated with the thyroid patient because maybe they don't fully understand or they don't fully comprehend. Surely a little bit of gluten isn't going to really hurt you, or does it really matter if you have soy sauce on your, you know, on your sushi, or some of those type of things. So how to, you know, what are your thoughts around that and how we explain those changes? And how significant they are, you know, to help them to understand that.
It's I think any of us that have made dietary changes like going gluten free, I think that's the most common with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. I think we've all heard that comment of just one piece of birthday cake isn't going to harm you, or like you say, just have it this one time, and you just want to scream, yes, it will, it really, really will. And that can be hard because for people who don't have to think about so much about what they eat and drink because they don't feel adverse effects, that's going to be really hard for them to understand how that impacts us. And I know at home, in our household, I am the only one who's gluten free. It's not something that I have enforced on the rest of my family. I think if you can sort of eat a wider diet and less restricted, it's going to cause you less stress and less things to worry about, then why not? I am an advocate of only removing foods that are genuinely causing an issue to us. And so it means that I have my own toaster. We have like separate cooking utensils. By and large, the whole family eats gluten-free anyway. My husband and I share the cooking, but the staples that we buy in are gluten-free. If we're doing things like pasta, which we don't do that often anyway, but it's just easier for everyone to eat the same. So yeah, at home, it's just it kind of is what it is. We've got very used to it over the last 5 or 6 years. But like going back to the work situation, that was a bit trickier to explain to work colleagues why, it was someone's birthday and they brought a cake in, why I couldn't have a piece, or what exactly that would do to my health. But with time and persistence, I find that people they do start to understand, and they do want to understand as well. And people will generally only make you sick by glutening you once or twice before they understand, oh yeah, they really do need to be gluten free and not eat
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we've had sort of friends and family members that have invited us around for a meal, and there did end up being gluten in the meal, and I wasn't very well afterwards. And they're now just extra cautious. That's not the most ideal way to go about learning it, but
Yeah.
it gets the message across very quickly that you can share resources with them. If there are resources like podcasts, books, posts online, articles that you find helpful, that talk about areas of managing our thyroid conditions like being gluten-free or other dietary changes, try and share them with your loved ones. We can't necessarily make them listen to the podcast or read the article, but if you can make it easier for them, send them snippets, deliver it to them in a quite an easy to absorb way. I find that helps an awful lot. Expecting them to dedicate a lot of time to understanding this is probably going to be a bit unrealistic if they're not the ones living with thyroid disease themselves. Why would they consume hours and hours worth of content? But yeah, if you can find ways to just get little snippets, little bite-sized pieces of information to them to help them understand, that alone can go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was when the book that I wrote came out last year, and I had a little book launch, and my mum and dad came up for it. And my mum has Hashimoto's, but she was only diagnosed a few years ago. And my dad always liked to make speeches at things, so he made a speech at this book launch, which was really lovely. And he read my book, and obviously he read my book probably because he's my dad, but he read my book also because mum, has only more recently been diagnosed, and he just said it was really helpful. And again, like in my book, probably this is the writing from a patient perspective, I've tried to keep it really simple. It's like, this is the non-technical explanations of things, and so I think he said, as a spouse of someone with Hashimoto's, it was really helpful to understand kind of what she's going through and what changes she's needing to make, and to make those changes when you're in your, late 60s, early 70s, not easy. And I mean, I even had Dad the other day ring me because they've been putting in a water filter system to, deal with all of the, the crap that's in the water. And he said, now, just how important is it to remove the fluoride, Annabelle? And I said, well, actually, Dad, it's very important. So yes, you do need to go to that extra step and get that extra filter. All right, it's okay. Whatever your mother needs, I'm sorting it all out. And it was very sweet, actually. But I think, him reading that book, like you say, give a resource. Now, I mean, not all husbands might read a whole book, but a podcast or actually something I found helpful, just maybe it was only last year or a year or two ago, we watched a documentary by I can't remember the guy's name, but his business or charity, it's a charity really, is called MS Hope. I don't know if you know the guy, but he's got MS, obviously. And so it really went through why it was so important. Like, his dad was relentless at researching all of the diet and lifestyle things that could support his son, because he was only fairly young, this guy, when he was diagnosed with MS. And so they have really been pioneers in a lot of this holistic, diet, nutrition, lifestyle space for MS. And really, when we're talking about autoimmune diseases, they're all very, very similar. And so actually watching that, even though it wasn't about thyroid condition, was about MS, it was really helpful for my husband to understand. He's like, oh, okay, now I get why you've got to be really, really kind of careful. And so just watching that was helpful. So I guess it's just finding those little things along the way, and understanding maybe you and I have probably got husbands that are quite receptive, but not all spouses are, that's a trickier situation.
It is, yeah. I think most importantly is that you're doing what you know you need to do for your health. And
Mm.
it, in an ideal world, everyone around us would understand. Everyone would be really supportive. It would be really easy. And that's just not the case, and that's never going to happen. We don't need people around us to be validating our experiences either. We know what it is. We know what we feel. We know what we experience, and often case we know what we need as well to feel well. And going back to boundaries, it often sort of comes back to us putting those boundaries in place and
Mm.
saying, no, you know what, I can't even eat just one piece of cake, because that will that will
Yep.
put me in a thyroid flare, or do whatever it does to your body, or overcommitting time and energy, changing career, or whatever it is, having that one alcoholic drink at a party when you know drinking alcohol just doesn't do good things for your thyroid health. Putting those boundaries in place. We don't, in an ideal world, having those supportive people around us to support us in that would be amazing. But if you don't have those people around you, it can certainly help to do that work, to learn how to put the boundaries in place yourself, and to how to withhold those, and develop that, I guess, like that assertiveness, and that ability to just know that you don't need anyone else's validation. Your experiences
Mm.
are still valid, and you can, whilst it's easier to have people to support us with those, you can still ultimately do it on your own if you've got the right resources, and just take baby steps. I think a lot of people, when they're first diagnosed and they're first trying to figure out what it is they need to do to get their health back on track, it can feel hugely overwhelming. There is so much information out there. You don't know where to begin, what to do first. You're thinking, do I need to change thyroid medication? Should I be going gluten free and dairy free? What about these supplements? And there's so much to consider. And I always
Mm.
say to people to just step back and take baby steps, just one thing at a time. Implement things one thing at a time. I know it's really appealing to implement all the things at once so that you can recover your health as soon as possible. But ultimately, if you're getting stressed because it's such a big thing to adapt and change to, and
Mm.
understand what your new normal is, that's also not going to be doing a good thing for getting it under control. We want to be um, kind of limiting stress wherever we can, and withholding boundaries and putting those things in place. That all helps with that too. So
Mm.
yeah, for anyone who is like at the beginning of their journey, and they don't know where to begin, they're feeling overwhelmed, and they're feeling alone because they don't have that really supportive support network around them yet, I would say, start by getting a copy of the test results, figure out, understand what thyroid medication you're on, understand those basics, understand what it is your medication should be doing, and is it doing that by looking at your test results. Start there, and then you can start exploring all these other lifestyle factors as you go along, and figuring out which areas of your life need more attention.
Mm. Yeah. I like that. I like what you said there, that, I mean, in the end, we're the ones that have to live with it. Yes, our
Yeah,
family and friends and work colleagues live with us, but we're the only ones that can really take true responsibility for our own health. So we're the
yeah,
ones that control what we put on and in our bodies. We are those ones. We can say no or yes, or what we
exactly.
we don't need anybody else. In fact, we can't have anyone else do it for us. We have to see ourselves as worthy of good health and making good decisions. And I really liked the way you put that. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I often say the thyroid patients who tend to get better are the ones that take an active role in their health. They aren't passive in their healthcare. They're asking questions. Um, they get a second, third, fourth opinion from doctors. They're researching. They're trying things out in terms of dietary stuff, switching up exercise, improving like sleep hygiene, various things that we can work on that form this big thyroid jigsaw puzzle. The people
Mm.
that are taking an active interest in that are the people that often get better. And like you say, it's really important that we value ourselves enough to understand that we deserve that. We all deserve to get
Mm.
better and feel well, and to thrive with thyroid disease. Whilst our thyroid condition might move up and down depending on where the seasons in life are taking us and other things that are going on, ultimately a foundation of coming back to good thyroid health after each maybe wave of life stress, that is going to be on us withholding those core practices that keep us in good health every day. So staying gluten free, maybe avoiding alcohol, doing whatever it is that helps you day to day. No one else can do that for you, right?
Yep. I know. We wish they could, don't we? Some days it would be just like, someone else take over. It would be nice. It would be nice. It'd be nice to have that magic pill or that magic person that was just going to do it all for us. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. But I think the good news is, if you're listening and you're feeling, maybe a bit overwhelmed or a bit lonely, like we said right back at the beginning, you're not alone, and we're all in this boat with you. Like we are all on this journey. Like we have the ups and downs too. Like we have the good days and the bad days, and the good test results and the bad test results, and and so find a community. I mean, I know many of my listeners will know, like I've got a Facebook group. You've probably got some similar things. I'll get you to tell us a little bit in a minute how people can connect with you, but find a community, even if it's an online community, where you know that you're going to be supported, that you're not just going to be fed negative stuff all the time. There's a lot of negative stuff online about living with thyroid conditions. And so I think, the reality is not every day is good, but you want to be in a group or in a community where the overall vibe is positive, hopeful. It's going to make you feel like, you're not isolated and alone. So tell us, Rachel, first of all, before, is there something along this whole, like, how do we talk about our thyroid health with the people around us? Is there anything that you think I haven't asked you that people need to know, or any last sort of thoughts on that topic before I get you to tell us where we can connect with you?
Not really. I feel like we've covered really good ground. Like I said, I think the key thing you can do is to figure out how to deliver those bite-sized chunks of information to your loved ones. So not everyone will sit and read a book. The book that my husband and I wrote, it takes about 3-4 hours to read from cover to cover. And some people just aren't going to do that for various reasons. We don't all have time. We're not going to prioritize it. But some people prefer podcasts because they can stick it on when they're commuting, when they're at the gym, when they're cooking dinner. Some people love to read a good article. Many of us also send out email newsletters. I find that for myself, they're a really good way for me to kind of receive and digest that information, and I can do so at my own pace, coming back to it as and when, especially when young children keep interrupting what I'm doing. But if you want those around you to understand a bit better, just try and find which way is going to work best for that person. Ask them, maybe try a couple of different ways. Personally, I find podcasts really good. I think a lot of people respond well to that, more like an informal chat of discussions and ideas going on. It's quite easy to have on in the background when you're doing various other things. But that would be my key thing. Try and find what form of information works for them, because once you've got that, then you can get those key bits of information in there.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Like, what's going to work for that person might be different to the way you like to get your information. I actually thought of one other thing that had come up in a much, much earlier podcast conversation, and that was it can be helpful, particularly if you are in those early stages, to take your partner along to medical appointments with you.
Yes.
And so that they're hearing the same information as you. And in fact, they might hear it better or differently to you, because they're probably not full of brain fog and confusion. And they're hearing the same information, particularly if you're going to, a good functional practitioner, or someone who actually really, hopefully, finds someone that's really understands about treating thyroid health properly. If you find one of them, definitely get your spouse along to an appointment there if you can, because I think that can be helpful for them to hear. It's not just you telling them, it's them hearing it from the health professional, which I think often can be helpful.
Yeah, that's really valuable. That's a really good piece of information, actually. And I find as well, when I take Adam along to appointments, he's a bit of like my health champion, in that he'll remember things I wanted to talk about that I might forget to bring up in the appointment. And before we leave, he'll say, "Oh, Rachel, remember you wanted to talk about this symptom, or if you could have this test done." And he was really good at that. He retained the information a lot better. So when you are the patient in an appointment, it can often feel overwhelming. Like, you're trying to remember what they're telling you, but you're also trying to remember what you need to ask next. And Adam was, like you say, not brain fogged, so had a clearer mind to like retain the information that we were going to need afterwards. And also, I'm always a bit hesitant to say this because I know that it's not what we want to hear, but we do live in a day and age where physicians, medical professionals, do often still listen to men a lot more than they listen to women. And I personally experienced a lot of going in, complaining of certain symptoms, and they kept trying to give me prescriptions for antidepressants when I knew it was just that my thyroid medication was not right and there was something else going on. Taking Adam in to see the same doctor and have the same conversation, we would leave with much different results. And it was just having this male presence there saying, I basically that he could validate everything that I was already saying, but
it's
also
terrible, isn't it? That's so
terrible. And he could also give like a concrete experience, like concrete examples. So I would say, now I'm feeling tired and brain fogged and I'm struggling to stay in work. But Adam could say, I have to physically help her get up the stairs. She used to enjoy sort of going out with friends, and now she just doesn't have that energy and that zest for it anymore. And he could back up what I was saying with examples of how he'd seen me deteriorate over the years. So if you can, and if you feel like it would be beneficial, take someone along to your medical appointments. Could be a friend, a family member, it could be your spouse, but often having an extra person to just validate what you're saying and weigh in, that can get you further along in the results that you want to get from your medical appointment.
Yeah. That's a good point too. A sad point to have to make, really, isn't it? But I think that's part of the frustration of women being diagnosed with thyroid conditions in the first place. That's that whole other conversation and all the medical gaslighting that goes on and all of that. So let's not go down that path. Tell us, Rachel. Tell us again about the names of your books, where to get them, how to connect with you, what, do you offer programs? Just give all of what you do a good plug so that if people want to connect with you, they know how and what you do.
Sure. So you can find me online pretty much anywhere under Rachel Hill, The Invisible Hypothyroidism. My first book, which you can see here, is Be Your Own Thyroid Advocate, and that is kind of like a thyroid Bible. Has all this sort of information that you need to know as a thyroid patient if you're either just diagnosed or just starting to try and understand why you might not be feeling better even on thyroid medication. That covers everything like thyroid medication types, what like the basics of what hypothyroidism is, as well as those lifestyle factors that we've spoken about, like diet, exercise, flare days, work, mental health. All of that stuff is in there. You, Me, and Hypothyroidism is the book that I wrote with Adam, and that's about maintaining our relationships when we have a thyroid condition, and that is written for our loved ones. So again, if you've got a friend or family member that wants to understand or needs to understand what it is you're going through and how we can use this experience to strengthen our relationships, then that is for them. And then my latest book, Thyroid Superhero, is mainly for the children in our lives to help them understand. But if you feel like it would help a few grown-ups as well, then by all means, it's got lots of lovely illustrations in there and some talking points to get those conversations going. But besides my books, you can find me at theinvisiblehypothyroidism.com. I believe I've got around 600 articles on there now. Covering.
Wow, that's a resource. That's an incredible resource.
Trying to cover the many areas that thyroid disease affects and how we can overcome these and live our best thyroid healthy lives with this condition. And then across social media, Facebook and Instagram is where I'm most active. You can always reach out, get in contact with me there and join the discussions that we're having. And then, my Facebook support group is called the Thyroid Family, and I think we have about 120,000 people over there now.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
It's a really lovely community. People are so supportive and helpful over there. And we're just trying to maintain, like we said earlier, that vibe that we, a more positive, welcoming vibe that it's okay to talk about the hard days and the hard times as well, but ultimately we want to be helping each other to keep moving forward. So that's another great resource. You can sign up to my email newsletters through my website. They go out every couple of weeks, and that just includes like a roundup of everything that's going on in the thyroid world. So podcast episodes like this, articles, thyroid research. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on in the thyroid sphere, there's my newsletter as well. But yeah, constantly working on trying to get information out to people in different formats, because I know that different people like to consume this information in different ways, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and look, there's so many platforms and ways now, isn't there? So yeah, it's hard to pick your platform, and yeah, it is hard to get it all out. But yeah, there's lots of different ways. So that's great. So there's lots of different ways they can connect with you. That's an enormous resource of resources. You really do like to write, don't you?
Yes.
That's a lot of articles. So I think the thing I like about the podcast is I just get to talk, and then people just get to listen. And but yeah, I think that sometimes people do want to read, and so I'm mindful of that too. So I think head to I'm sure you've got search functions on your website too, so people can search. And I know I've come across your articles in the past too. So yeah, have a good read, have a good dig in. Thank you, Rachel, for all that you've done over many, many years for the thyroid family around the world, the thyroid community. And like I said at the beginning, I think you really were one of, part of those pioneers. I think it really was around that was around that same period of time, like 10 years ago, like I started to really, really kind of get into the diet and lifestyle stuff too. So to have people like you who have been out and going for this long is really encouraging. So thank you.
Yeah, we need to continue to get more voices out there, so we can continue to share all the aspects of our lives that it's affecting, and all the aspects of our lives that we can hopefully take more control over, to get this under control and to get more people treated, diagnosed, and on the path back to a thyroid healthy life again.
All right, this is your KISS thyroid coaching segment. I love that Rachel used the KISS principle as well. Keep it super simple. I can promise you that was not not contrived. I think we just both have that similar approach, probably because we're both patients that have learnt to live with our Hashimoto's, and we've had to work out how to keep it super simple. So these couple of questions really are just to consider, to help you to consider what you've just listened to, and whether there's anything that you need to do or think about, or conversations you need to have as a result. So the first question I would get you to think about is, do you need to have any conversation about your thyroid health with anybody in your community? So family, friends, spouse, children, work colleagues. And number two, if you think that would be beneficial for them and for you to have that conversation, how are you going to do that? Is just a conversation? Do you need to equip them with some resources? And if you do need to, or you think them having a resource might be helpful, what resource do you think they are most likely to be receptive to? Is it a podcast? Is it an article? Is it a book? So maybe have a think about those things too. And, I guess 3 is, if you do need to have that conversation, then I would encourage you to plan that conversation, even if you're just planning it in your own mind, but to plan to have that in the next month or so, while it's still fresh, and, after you've had a bit of time to work out what approach you're going to take to that. So thanks again for listening to the Let's Talk Thyroid podcast. Always appreciate knowing that you are there on the other end of a headphone or a phone, or, whether you're doing your sewing, like I know there's a couple of ladies that listen to this as they sew, or driving your car to work, or while you're cooking, or going for a walk. Whenever you listen to it, I appreciate that you listen, and that that you're in my thyroid community, because I know that gives me support too. So thank you very much. Have a fabulous week, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister, or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, to this podcast. It's free. It's really helpful because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.